Welcome to Voices of the Community, which explores critical issues facing Northern California communities. We introduce you to the voices of community thought leaders and change makers who are working on solutions that face our fellow individual community members, neighborhoods, cities, and our region. This is George Koster, your host. This episode is part of our series exploring COVID-19's impact on nonprofits and small businesses in the San Francisco Bay Area. Back in April of 2020, when we decided to create this ongoing series on COVID-19's impact, first on nonprofits and then on small businesses in the San Francisco Bay Area, we, like you, had no idea how long the pandemic would go on and what the health and economic impact would be in our community. With vaccinations increasing, COVID-19 cases and deaths decreasing, we're now moving into the summer of 2021 with the reopening of the economy and all of the uncertainty of our ever-changing indoor and outdoor, vaccinated and unvaccinated protocols, and the politics that will drive how we all come back together as a unified or fractured community. We will continue to shine a spotlight on the nonprofits and small businesses that make up the fabric of our community, along with the founders and staff who are struggling to deal with the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on their operations, services, and sustainability until we can all get to the other side of the pandemic. Along the way, we will also share with you all the amazing solutions that our nonprofits, small businesses, foundations, and government leaders are working on to help us all get to the other side of the pandemic and come together to rebuild our communities with more economic, social, and environmental equality.
We realize that access to water, to clean water, should be a human right for everyone, but it's just not the case for a lot of our guests. So we started out with just some hoses and like an access point. And what we saw there, that people didn't just use it for water to drink, but really to wash themselves. And what I'm saying is like really wash themselves in the street. And as we observed that, we felt that that was really not in line with our idea of what it means to be recognized in your dignity as a human being. And we felt we needed to do something about that.
In this episode, we wanted to feature the voice of a legacy social service organization that's approach to providing a hand up to our low-income and unhoused community members is that of seeing them as guests and walking with them on their journey. Over the past 70 years, St. Anthony's has been providing a holistic approach to supporting families and individuals in the Tenderloin community. Our featured voice is the Chief Executive Officer of St. Anthony's, Nils Behnke. I am joined remotely by the Chief Executive Officer of St. Anthony's, Nils Behnke. Welcome to Voices of the Communities, Nils.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being here today.
I really wanted to have St. Anthony's on the program because St. Anthony's is another one of those legacy social service programs really rooted in the Tenderloin, one of our most low-income communities in San Francisco. And it's, as I was reading one of the descriptions from the people being serviced, it's a family of services. So could you share with the audience all of the programs that St. Anthony's provides?
Absolutely. Happy to do that. And you're right, we just celebrated our 70th birthday in the Tenderloin. So indeed, we've been here for a long time. And really, we provide a pretty comprehensive continuum of care to our guests, and it really falls in three different categories. The first one is essential services. So I think we're very well known for our dining room and where we welcome our guests and feed them with food. There is safety services that provide a safe environment on our block for our clients, the client safety services. And then we have a clothing program, which is, I believe, the largest free clothing program, at least in the city. We're also a provider of healthcare services. We have a clinic here that caters in particular to people who otherwise would have had issues with getting quality care and access to care. There is a residential recovery program for men for substance and alcohol use. And then we have a third pillar of our programming, which we call the Gateway to Stability, with services that connect people to their employment and professional life. There's the Tenderloin Technology Lab that addresses digital inclusion, so people can come and use our technology services, computers and the like. We have a workforce development program that prepares our guests to re-enter the workforce. And one thing that we're particularly proud of, we actually do employ a lot of our guests over time, provide training, and hopefully help them to qualify for the route. So it's really these three things. Having said that, what is probably the most important to us is that we actually walk with our guests. And that means that we don't just have services that kind of stand side by side in silos, but we really look at the whole person and look how things come together for the individual. And having such a comprehensive set of services, I think we're probably very well positioned to help our guests connecting the dots and actually meet them where they are and also make progress on their journey. We have specific guest navigators, case managers, social services that help with that. And the last thing that I would say, while scope and scale of what we do is pretty large, it is very important to us to adhere to our values as a Franciscan organization, one of which is personalism, that we treat everyone individually as a person with dignity and respect. And I think those are the things that are dear to our heart. So as much as we're proud of what we do, I think it's almost more important to us how we do it.
Well, and staying with it, a couple of the programs that really stood out for me was within the recovery program, which requires someone to participate for a year. And it sounds like they're also a resident. There's the workforce training component of it. So getting back to your point of connecting the dots, could you share a little bit more about how that is all integrated? Because it sounds like, to your point, where you're hiring folks, but you're stabilizing their housing, you're providing recovery, and then you're doing job training, and then you're helping them find a job.
That is the idea that we do that. And it's a comprehensive program, right? It's a 1-year program that stands out. It's a residential program and it is open to people from all walks of life. A lot of them with significant barriers to employment. The substance and alcohol use is just one of them. Often it's a history of incarceration, lack of qualifications and job training. And we try to address that holistically and that we look at each person individually, but provide some basic workforce development, but then also training. And actually a lot of our graduates from our program end up working for us, for example, in client safety services or the dining room, at least for some period of time. Some stay actually for a longer period of time. So it's not just entry level jobs, but we actually make sure that we provide opportunities to folks who have had less opportunities to participate in formal education so that they can actually acquire the skills to advance to managerial opportunities, of which we have a few examples of in our organization.
That's great. So here we are 15 months in, COVID's still here with us with Delta variant. How did St. Anthony's, I hate to use the term, but everybody loves it, pivot during COVID? And now here we are, we're still doing it. And you guys are in the process of reopening. And a couple of the programs that stood out for me, of course, was the potable water program and then your hygiene hub program that you guys are doing. And then last year, I did a whole piece on St. Boniface's and the Sacred Sleep with the Coupa Project. And you guys are helping resurrect that. So tell us what your plans are for the future, how you're doing it now.
Maybe I'll start talking a bit about impact of COVID and pivoting. It clearly has hit us all very hard. The thing that I'm probably most proud of, what we have got accomplished, is that we actually stayed open the entire time. We did not close down. We continued to serve our guests really almost without interruption. And we've actually picked up where some of the other providers of similar services had, for one reason or another, to shut their doors to their guests at various points. So, for example, in our dining room, we saw a significant increase in the meals that we provided. At the peak, it was about 3,500 a day because other food pantries and other options had just shut down. And just picture the scene of our people, all hands on deck at the very beginning of COVID, where it was really unclear how it's being transmitted, what was possible, including all the people who worked in the office, came over to the dining room and helped us not just to keep it open, but to continue to serve our guests. So I think this is really great. And we actually pivoted to have all services outside. So basically, we continued literally every program that we just talked about. Of course, our recovery program continued to be inside and people still lived there as residents. But all the rest, we actually moved out to the street on the block here. And I want to highlight that the cooperation with the city was very important in that. The city was actually able to help us with temporary block closure here that allowed us to use the entirety of the block to put our services outside. So that was really helpful. I talked about the heroism of our staff in this whole story, which is just something that I feel we can be really proud of because really we had a policy in place that allowed everybody who chose for health reasons to not show up here without us furloughing people, because that would not be aligned with our values to do that, right? But the vast majority of people, everyone who could do health-wise, actually showed up. And the way they showed up was just exemplary. So it was wonderful to see that. And then lastly, I also want to mention the generosity of our donors. Actually, we received more donations last year than the year before. And I think a lot of people realized that it was more costly and harder for us to do these things. And they really stepped up. So it was a great experience. Yeah, you said we've learned a lot of things, and we can talk more about the Hygiene Hub in a minute. Two things that I wanted to highlight reflecting on COVID is we've learned when we said we pivoted to COVID, we don't just want to go back to normal and I think that's true for a lot of things that we do, right? Because normal for us is not good. What we do may be good, but the situation isn't good, right? So what can we learn and apply? And so I think this going outside and meeting our guests where they are has been really helpful. So, for example, our social workers in the resource center have always done a wonderful job. But being outside, I think, made more people aware what is happening and what services we have to offer, and made them more accessible. So there are certain elements of this being outside and meeting people in the street that we're going to keep. As we have moved everything back inside, we still have that presence. And the other thing that I don't know you're aware of, probably not, since we're just beginning with it, is we actually are working on a permanent block closure. So the city was very cooperative and helpful with the temporary block closure from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. every day. But what we realized here with all our neighbors on the block is that we could not just provide community services in a different way, but it also built community in a completely different way. So we're hoping that we can accomplish a 24/7 closure of our block to through traffic. We're calling it the Golden Gate Greenway. And we've actually written a letter to the mayor. We've opened the website, and we can talk maybe later about how people can engage. But that is a big project for the future that has come directly out of COVID.
And then, Nils, could you share a little bit about the potable water program that you guys put together? Because I think most people, perhaps who are listening, is that we take for granted that we go to our faucet, turn on the water. But if you're living out in the open, if you're unhoused, having access to fresh water to wash your hands during a pandemic, to do any kind of basic hygiene. So that was one of the pieces. And then I think that led to your Hygiene Hub, as I recall.
That is exactly right. Yes, that was the journey we were on. We realized that access to water, to clean water, should be a human right for everyone, but it's just not the case for a lot of our guests. So we started out with just some hoses and an access point. And what we saw there, that people didn't just use it for water to drink, but really to wash themselves. And what I'm saying is really wash themselves in the street. And as we observed that, we felt that that was really not in line with our idea of what it means to be recognized in your dignity as a human being, and we felt we needed to do something about that. And so what we did is that we actually put forward a proposal to our board to set up permanent showers inside of our building and a laundry facility. So that's the Hygiene Hub. And I'm very proud that our board basically helped us in recognizing, in a very difficult time where it wasn't clear how the whole COVID situation would develop and our financial situation would develop, to just believe and step up and make that investment. And I'm proud to say that we will open these showers and our Hygiene Hub with the laundry facilities at the end of August. So it's going to be great. And I think it's going to be much appreciated by the community, especially as some of the other options that have been there, especially the mobile facilities of Lavame, are no longer around. So we hope to really contribute here. You also mentioned the Safe Sleep, our sacred service. That is right. People probably know that for a long time across the street at St. Boniface, together with the Gubbio Project, we have hosted people and gave them the opportunity to rest in the church during the daytime. And we're planning to reopen this service to our guests again in September. Obviously, we still have to manage through COVID, but we feel pretty confident that the time is right to do that again. So there are many good ways in which we have learned in COVID times.
And now, so you've been at the organization for a while. You were a board member, then I think you were a president of the board, and now you've been, I hate to use the term, sucked into the chief executive position to, as we were talking before we came on, to solve problems daily. What do you feel has been the biggest impact of St. Anthony's on our unhoused community members in San Francisco?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. So first of all, thank you for recognizing my own journey in my second mountain here. As a recovering management consultant, now in the managerial positions. It's a wonderful journey. I deeply believe in our mission. Yeah, the impact on our unhoused community, the services that we provide, and there's obviously quantitative metrics around it, and you can talk about how many meals we provided in a day. But I think the biggest impact, hopefully, that we have is how we do things. And that's something that I personally always felt that drew me long ago to St. Anthony's. You come here and you feel a certain degree of like peace. You see there's a very well organized process in our dining room, but the atmosphere is really what sets us apart. And that's what many volunteers tell us. And I think it goes back to our core value of building community as a Franciscan organization. And that's a community not just of our guests, but it's really a community of guests, staff, and volunteers. So our dining room is not a soup kitchen, but it's really more of a gathering place where people come together to have a meal. We're actually building it out as a cultural center. We have bingo there. We have chess. We have other things that we provide. And we have to invite our guests. And a lot of the people who are our guests, as you pointed out, people who experience homelessness or who are marginally housed. And quite frankly, they don't get invited to a lot of places, like where you can be together. And we feel this is a very, very important thing. And I think there's this theme of invitation. So we invite people to come and change. And I think that's what is important to understand. This is our guests as much as our staff and volunteers, because the guests, obviously, we hopefully can impact their lives and with the services that we provide. But it also invites our staff and our volunteers to change their view, what it means to be homeless, to experience homelessness, to experience extreme poverty. And often it changes people's views on what it means. And it changes maybe the way they view themselves in this system as well. So there's a fair degree of reciprocity that is going on, right? We give, but we're also giving. And we're given and we give. And this is deeply rooted, I think, in our identity as a Franciscan Catholic organization and part of the Franciscan movement. So when Father Alfred founded St. Anthony 70 years ago, he actually did it on a couple of very revolutionary principles for his time. The first one is he wanted to build a community, and that community meant handing out food to people is not sufficient. It is inviting people in and being in community and eating together and building a community around the dining room. And the second one thing that he did, and that people often don't know, is he was welcoming everybody. So you didn't have to participate in prayer or be Catholic or any of this stuff. No, it was completely irrespective of people's background. And those are values that we still stand by to this day. So I think the impact, has a lot to do with how we do things and how we build community.
Thank you. Great history. So how can folks who are listening to the show basically get engaged in helping St. Anthony's programs? It sounds like there's people who can volunteer. I read in the tech lab, for example. So if some tech person or person with basic tech skills is out there listening to this, sounds like they can become a volunteer and help folks with technology, workforce training. Tell us how folks can get engaged.
Yeah, volunteering is a very big part of how people can engage here. And we're back in person for our volunteers. So now is the time. And I just want to also say everybody who would like to do that can sign up on our website. There's an easy portal. It's saintanthonisf.org, and you can sign up here as a volunteer. It's a powerful experience. We have lots of people who have been volunteers for us for over decades. We just celebrated the 35th anniversary of one of our volunteers here. But there's space for everyone. And you say it right. There's the volunteering in our services, in the dining room, with the free clothing program. But whatever your gift is that you can bring to bear in the technology lab, elsewhere, it is much appreciated. And we have people from all kinds of differences and backgrounds. There are other places how you can engage. I would also say, especially for your younger listeners who are maybe in the tech community, we have a Young Professionals Council here of young professionals of professional services, tech companies, nonprofits that is kind of a youth organization, young adults who do all kinds of things. They volunteer, they donate, they have built their own community around that. So that's maybe another thing worth thinking about. Of course, there's donation. That's an opportunity for everybody. And I would encourage everybody to think about how they can do it. But quite frankly, there's also an element just of being informed about what we do. You mentioned some of these things. Follow us on social media. We have active feeds on your regular platforms like Twitter and Instagram. And in that context, I want to talk about advocacy as well. So we talked about these things that we want to do. A big one here is the permanent block closure, where we actually want to build like greenery outside here for our guests to come together. So if you go to our website, which is goldengategreenway.org, there's a way where you can sign up and actually advocate and help us make that happen.
That's great. So I'm going to circle back for a moment on the potable water and the hygiene hub. My guess is you guys are always looking for funding since those are both new projects and aren't easy to create.
Thank you. Absolutely, we do. And the commitment that some people don't understand is that once you build out a service like that, you need to actually be able to provide it. And this is actually very costly. A lot of time people have a hard time understanding why is it so expensive to provide services to marginalized and unhoused populations. I'll give you an example. So the showers that we're building, gender neutral, ADA compliant showers, right, as they should be for our guests. And think of it like people may have seen that at airports, right? So there's a toilet in there, there's a shower in there, and of course it needs to get cleaned between everyone using it so that works. The other thing that you have to see is once you provide a shower, you typically have to also understand that people might be using substances in the shower. So we need to have the supervision, motion control, first aid, Narcan, all these things available for cases when that happens. So when you add this all up to provide the 30,000 or so showers that we want to do with a 7-day-a-week kind of program, you're looking at a pretty substantial sum that we need to raise every year. And I want to thank you for bringing that up because we really depend on the generosity of our donors to be able to continue to provide that service once we open it at the end of August.
Thank you. All of these services require not only building it, but then the ongoing operation and legacy of it. So I want to turn to, you've been there for a while now. If you would please share with the audience one of your favorite moments of working with St. Anthony's.
There are many, right? And I think everybody who works here, works here with and for a purpose. So that connection to the mission is important and the connection to the people. And I think that's what I would probably want to highlight most. We talked about the fact that a lot of the people working at St. Anthony's used to be our guests. And I think that serves us well in many ways because they have a specific understanding for our guests' needs, understand when people are in a mental health crisis, that's not the moment to call the police, but it's a moment of de-escalation. And in particular, I would like to point out our client safety services, which are not security, but a safety service that we actually provide to some other organizations as well as a social enterprise. And just the way that our folks are trained to de-escalate and actually meet our guests where they are, I think is very exemplary. But also it gave me the opportunity to experience working with our former guests as colleagues. And I think there's a big learning about like fragility and humanity and all our interactions, right? And recognizing like we all belong to each other. And I think that is probably the most powerful impression and moment that I would like to share.
Thank you. I feel that the COVID-19 pandemic has really provided the proverbial X-ray to show that we are all connected. Your air and my air all shared can lead to both good health or really bad health. Final question for you now. What would you say are some of the positive things that could come out of the COVID-19 crisis to support our unhoused community members in San Francisco?
I think hopefully we've learned to think differently, all of us. So the city, the stakeholders, corporations, nonprofits, right? And we don't go back to normal as it has been because normal hasn't been good. And we do have a big challenge in our city with urban poverty and people experiencing this poverty and homelessness. And I think we all know it, but now is the time to really think, what do we want to do differently? And I think we have shelter-in-place hotels that hopefully can become more permanent. We have things like our block closure. Let's just be creative and work together. I think that is very important. And I think that's one thing that's high on my mind, because a lot of the times it feels in our city we're not all working together. We're not coming together for the best of our citizens and the best of our guests. And I think we can all do that. And you're right. If there's one thing that we've learned during COVID, right, we're all in community. We can't really isolate ourselves from each other. And if we want to succeed, we need to succeed together. And that means we need to also take those along that have more barriers and for whom it is harder. And I think it's also for us, like as an organization, it's a challenge to also improve our services and to think how we can do better. And I think that's an ongoing challenge, and it's the right challenge.
Well, and I feel like in producing the show for the last 15 months, some of the themes that have come out is that housing is healthcare.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's important that we connect these services. I think one of the things that I found interesting coming here and knowing St. Anthony's, but not so many of our partner organizations, is that there's a tendency to look at your guests and the service that you provide a little bit in a siloed way. And I think it's a challenge for all of us providers to think, what is the guest journey and how can we accompany our journey? So we provide some shelter, as you mentioned, but we're not a housing provider. But as a matter of fact, we have started conversations with a number of the big housing providers and said, how can we work together? And that's about our future services and what we want to emphasize. And I think there's a component where someone is really good at providing housing services. I believe we're really good at providing recovery services, workforce development, and healthcare, and potentially employment. So how can we actually come together, right? And compare what do we do and how do we coordinate? We have a big meeting tomorrow with one of the housing providers here where we talk about a strategic partnership and how we make things come together for our guests in a different way. And I think that's where a lot of the action has to be for us in the future.
And now that really ties back into the kind of comprehensive or holistic wraparound services. One of the things that you guys do well, right, is as you take someone through your journey, part of it is basically getting them integrated into social services through your social worker program. So I could see that as being a pathway to housing.
That's exactly right. And I think the point is a lot of people believe that housing first is the right way, and that's part of it. You mentioned that housing is healthcare, and the other things need to happen as well. And if I think about our future, I think this is where we have a big role to play, because to have people who are especially vulnerable populations really in a situation where they go from unhoused, substance use, unemployed to a stable living position, right? That is housed, that is employed, that is sober, right? It takes more than just a point intervention. It really means building community around that and a continued support for people so they can stay employed, they can stay sober, they can stay housed. And I think we all need to think more about what that could look like and what our place in that is. We're certainly very, very committed to continuing to provide that service.
Thank you. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you wanted to cover?
I just would like to invite all the listeners to come and see us here in the Tenderloin. The doors are always open 7 days a week. And whatever it is that you want to bring, if you just want to inform yourself, if you want to become a volunteer, a donor, come and see us, experience it for yourself. And we welcome you all.
All right. Thank you, Nils, for sharing St. Anthony's work today. We'll make sure that listeners have your contact information, website, and social media so they can follow St. Anthony's programs and all of your projects, which are going to make a huge difference, I think, for the Tenderloin community. And hopefully folks can get engaged to work and help our unhoused community members. So please stay safe and healthy as we work our way through what appears to be this new pseudo-normalcy of reopening.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Voices of the Community. You've been listening to the Chief Executive Officer of St. Anthony's, Nils Behnke. To find out more about St. Anthony's programs, as well as getting engaged as a volunteer, or to donate clothing or make a donation, please go to stanthonysSF.org. And to support the Golden Gate Greenway project, please go to goldengategreenway.org. Nils mentioned Lava Mae providing public showers. To find out more about Lava Mae, we hope that you'll listen back to our interview with Donice Sandoval and Chris Kepler of Lava Mae X in Episode 3. We also spoke about the Guppio Project at St. Boniface that provided sacred sleep to homeless community members until the pandemic shut it down in spring of 2020. To find out more about the Guppio Project and sacred sleep, please listen to our interview with Shannon Zinga of the Guppio Project in episode 7. We really want to hear from you in our short listener survey, so please go to georgecoster.com and click on the survey button on the upper right-hand side of the homepage and provide us your feedback and insights. Please tune in to KSFP 102.5 FM to next week's show on August 19th at 8:30 a.m., and we will be featuring voices from the Shipyard Trust for the Arts and Youth Spirit Artworks about their work with both our artist and youth community members in both San Francisco and Oakland. We hope that you enjoyed the insights, points of view, and personal stories from the voices of changemakers and their nonprofits and small businesses featured in this series. To find out more and get engaged with the nonprofits, small businesses, and staff members featured in the series, please go to my website, georgecoster.com, and click on Voices of the Community to find links to the extended versions of these interviews and to listen to the entire series. After listening to these stories, we hope that you will consider making a donation and volunteering to provide a hand up to your fellow community members. I want to thank my associate producer, Eric Estrada, and Casey Nance at Citron Studios, along with the wonderful crew at the San Francisco Public Press and KSFP. Voices of the Community is a member of Intersection for the Arts, which allows us to offer you a tax deduction for your contributions. Please go to georgecoster.com and click on the donate link to make a donation to help us provide future shows just like this one. While you're on our website, you can enjoy our archived past shows, which feature community voices working on solutions to critical issues facing Northern California communities. And you can sign up for our newsletter to find out more about future shows, as well as shows and events from the organizations that are included in our episodes. Take us along on your next COVID walk by subscribing to Voices of the Community on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and Google Podcast, or wherever you get your podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at George Coster, and we'd love to hear from you with feedback and show ideas, so send us an email to george@georgecoster.com. I'm George Coster in San Francisco, and thank you for listening.